Hi, and welcome to another video in our series on open source on IBM. I'm Matt Seeberger, the Bearded Geek, and today I want to talk to you about installing Ansible on Ubuntu to connect to and manage IBM. Hopefully what you get out of today is a glimpse at how you can install Ansible, how to get comfortable running your first playbook and setting up the host file and connections, and hopefully this will get you started so that you can start exploring all the various options that are given to you and provided through this Ansible tool. Okay, so first we're going to go to the Microsoft Store. We're going to search for Ubuntu. I'm going to go ahead and install 20.04 long-term support. Actually, I'm going to go back and install this other version because I already had 20.04 LTS installed, even though it said I didn't. So we'll go ahead and let this download. Okay, and it's installed. Okay, create my username, put in my password. Okay, so now we have our Ubuntu system set up, so I'm going to do a clear to give us a clean window. And we'll move right into installing the next pieces. First, I'm going to do a sudo apt update just to get our system the latest packages. Okay, now that that's done, we're going to do a sudo apt install Ansible. And this will install the Ansible application for us. Okay, now while that's going, I'm going to connect over to my open source package management for the IBM that we're going to be connecting to. Because we're going to need to install a few Python pieces in order for Ansible to work. Okay, so we're going to come down to Python 3, and we're going to select Python 3 IBM_DB, and the iToolkit. So I'm just control clicking on all those and click install, and this is just going to install those 3 packages. And you can see here that there's a dependency for Python 3-6. So it's going to install all those packages when I hit Y. Okay, and our Python install, so we can just let our Python install finish up here, and our Ansible install wrapped up over here so we can continue on. So what I'm going to do first off is I'm going to edit the host file for Ansible. So if you do a sudo nano or whatever your editor of choice is to etc Ansible hosts, you'll see it'll bring up this file. This is the host file, and there's some really helpful comments in here, explaining the comment line starts with the pound, blank lines are ignored. You can group hosts together with this header. You can also use host name, like the FQDN, or specify the system by IP. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just clear out all this text here, and I am going to make a group here, and I'm going to type in here the name of my system. This is just a kind of a friendly name that will help you identify it. And then I'm going to put in the IP, or in this case, you could do fully qualified domain name or anything like that. Okay. And then since I am connecting to my system with a different name, with a different SSH user than how I have my Ubuntu system set up, I'm actually going to specify here how I want that the connection to be made. If you don't do this, it's actually going to try to connect with, in my case, the Beardo user, which does not exist on my IBMI. And so you don't want that to happen. Okay, and then I'm going to just create some variables here. So we're going to do Ansible with a Python interpreter, just telling it where to find that. And so since we're connected to the IBMI, that's going to be in the packages bin Python 3. Okay, so we've got both pieces I believe we're going to need now. Okay, I'm just going to save that. Okay, now what we're going to want to do is we can just display that file. Or, this is just another way to display it if you didn't want to have to go in and edit it. But you can see here that we have our group, test servers, and our host consists of, right now, just one host, OSS dev. At this IP, we're using the interpreter found here for Python, and then as this SSH user. Okay, so the next thing that we can do, just to kind of test and see how things are going, is we can actually ping the host in our file. So if I had multiple hosts in here and I ran this, it would actually go out and try to ping all of those hosts. So this is the first time I've tried to connect to my IBMI, and it's going to fail because we do not have our SSH key loaded up from our Ubuntu system into the IBMI authorized _keys file. And since I just created this Ubuntu instance, I need to actually generate a key. So I'm going to generate an SSH key. Just take all the defaults. And now I'm going to copy that key up to my IBMI. And if there's no authorized _keys file under my user on my IBMI, it's actually going to create that file for me and then add this in there. One thing that to make note of is if you do this process and it creates the file for you and adds the keys, sometimes there's a permissions thing that happens, and so you might have to change the owner or change the permissions on the home folder and the authorized keys file so that the system can actually read it properly. But we'll see in this case we might not have to do that. SSH, we want ID _SA. So this is basically going to copy our ID, and the ID file is located in .ssh folder, ID RSA, you can see right here. And then I'm going to put in my username and then where my IBMI is located. Execute that. It's going to prompt me the first time for my password. Enter that, and you see it added the key. So we could actually just test that. I could type 17. Okay, and you see here that it just made the connection, didn't prompt me for a password, and now I'm connected to OSS dev as matdev. So we know that it took the SSH key that I just generated and added it up to my server. So now if I go back and I run this Ansible all ping, should get a success. Okay, and we did not, because it says there's a shared connection. Okay, it's saying, oh, because I spelled QOpenSys wrong. So you can see that how you spell things is important, which we all know. Actually, I'm not sure this matters either, but okay, now this should work. Okay, now we get our success. So you can see, just by making a simple typing error, how things can fail. This will also come into effect when we're actually running playbooks and building the playbooks. Everything is, case sensitive in many instances, and it does matter and depend where you, space things and how you type it out. So, and I'll show you a little bit more of that once we start doing the playbooks. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to pull down some IBM collections. These are some playbooks and some pieces that are out at Ansible Galaxy. You can go out there and check out what those are if you go to the Ansible Galaxy website. I'm also going to be putting some links under this video to give you more information on how to install Ansible, where the Ansible Galaxy store or place is. Also, the modules I'm going to show you right now, I'll put all those links at the bottom of the video so you guys can check those out on your own. Okay, so now we have this Galaxy collection. So what I want to do is I want to open up Visual Studio, and I'm going to refresh this, and I'm actually going to connect to this Ubuntu that we just installed. So I basically, within Visual Studio, it actually can be tied to your Windows subsystem Linux environments. So I just went there, clicked on the environment we just installed. That's going to open it to where you can see it's open down here. And then now when I open folder, I can select where I want it to start. So I'm actually going to just have it start in my home folder for my user. And the reason I wanted to do this is just to show you, how to look at the playbooks and kind of see what we just installed. So here you can see we've got our .ansible folder, which was generated right here when we, as part of this, we did install the collections and all these other pieces. So here's our collection. And then you can see here's our playbooks. And these are all the playbooks that came with this collection. And I'd encourage you to read through them and kind of look at them, use them as an example as you're building your own. There's some really great examples in here. Here's how to do, a SQL against the system. So basically, like in these playbooks, it's going to run it against all the hosts, which you can actually specify though when you run the playbook, if you only want it to go against a specific host. But in this case, it's just going to be all hosts. So if I were to just say Ansible playbook execute whatever is in my host file, it'll just run against all of them. And then you can see here, it's going to create a journal receiver. It's going to run a CL command to do that. It's going to create a journal, this journal. It's going to run a SQL command to create a table, and and so on and so forth. So here you have some really good examples on how to build your playbook and what one should look like. All right, so let's get to running a playbook. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm just going to bring over these 3 ones that I made, and I'll show you guys. I'm just going to dump them. I'm going to create a new folder. Yeah, I think I can just drag them in there. Okay. So here you can see I create a samples folder, and I just have 3 simple YAML files. So the YAML file is actually, a sequence of steps in what they consider a playbook, what they call a playbook. And where you get those commands from, there's actually this site here that's IBM github.io, and there's modules for Ansible for IBM. So you can scroll through all of these and see all the different ones that are available. There's lots of different resources available online, so feel free to Google and search around. There's lots of people that have written articles on different ways you can manage the IBM with Ansible. But hopefully this will just get you started and show you what is available. So for instance, like this one, if we wanted to create a library, this is just naming what the step is, and then here's the CL command, that the module that's built for doing that. So you would call IBM _ CL _ command. This is the command it's going to pass. If you wanted to do it as a specific user and with a specific password, you can also do that by specifying those things there. Okay, so in this case, I went into that modules area and I searched and I found one for starting a subsystem and ending a subsystem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to my system, and we're going to just verify if the subsystem is already running or not. Now I could do this from Ansible, but in the interest of time, I am going to just do it all from here. Okay, so I'm doing a work active job, and you can see QCommon subsystem is running. So if I were to come over here, and from my folder here, I would say .ansible / samples. Actually, I think I need to do it this way. Ansible playbook. Okay, so I'm basically just saying execute Ansible playbook, and my playbook is in the Ansible folder, samples, and then this is the name of the playbook. So you can see here that it's playing all of the steps in that playbook, and then I only have one task, which is end a subsystem with options. And you can see that it successfully executed and it did change, which means that it went through. And you'll get a status at the end that it ran successfully and if it made changes. So sometimes you might run things that will just execute, but they don't actually change anything, because maybe you have something in there that says, check this first, and if this, then do that. In those cases, they'll just say okay, and it won't actually have changed anything. Change means that it actually, carried through with making a change on the system. So if I come back over here and I refresh, you can see that QCommon subsystem is now ended. So if I wanted to start it back up, I have another playbook that's set up the same way. It's just executing the reverse. Let me close this out since we don't need it anymore. So you can come over here and you see the same thing. So it's going to start a subsystem, and they actually have an Ansible command for starting a subsystem. And so you just give it that, and then whatever subsystem you want to start. We can see it went through successfully. And then if I come over here and refresh again, you can see QCommon's back in the list here. Okay, so one of the last things I want to show you is just a little bit more complicated playbook here. So in this case, I wanted to run, a sequence of steps against the system, and this is what I wanted to do. So the first thing I wanted to do was create a user. So I'm going to create the user test with the password test1234. I know, very secure, right? Then I wanted to create a user home directory for that user, because by default, when you create a user profile, it doesn't create this directory. Then I want to see if Git is installed on the system. If it is, or if it's not there, then I want it to be installed. I'm going to create a symbolic link. I'm going to set the https.ssl verify. I'm going to clone a repo. I am going to create a library. We're going to execute 2 SQL scripts that we got from this repo. I'm going to see if, once this was created, if I have data in the table. And then I'm going to display that, and then I'm going to do that the same thing for another table. Let's go ahead and run that one. Okay, so you can see I made a syntax error, and the error is on this create directory. So we come back up and look here. Okay, so the problem is that so I found that when you have something, a command that you're running that has a delimiter in it, that if you just take the whole command like this, it'll run. You can close it in different brackets in order for it to run as well. But I'm pretty sure that this should run for us now. Okay, so you can see it immediately already got past that error. Now it's playing through all the steps. So it successfully created the user, created the home directory, verified the Git. It skipped installing Git because it was already there. Okay, and you can see that we got a little error when it was creating the table. Okay, perfect. So this will give us a good, bit of explaining on how this works. You can see this is a really long return that we got here. But yeah, so it ran through all the tests or the steps successfully. And when we got down here to create the patient table, you can see that we got an error. And we get this ginormous string, which is pretty much what we get back from, if we're running it in a green screen or anything like that. This is kind of typically what gets returned back in like a job log. And you can see that it found some errors when it was running the run SQL command in the statement string, and that it created a file that you can see these errors in. So I think if I remember right, there was something with that file that I had hard-coded that was a problem. I think it was maybe the user I was specifying to grant access to the table. I think I had it hard-coded for that. We can actually look at it. But you can see that you get some feedback here, and you can read through this and figure out, even though there is a lot of text here, you can actually figure out what the problem was many times and go back and correct it and run it again. So it did actually probably create the table. It just didn't get through all of the steps, because I think I have one in there that it just failed on, if I remember the last time I ran it. So it did query, but it didn't find any data because it didn't write any data to the table. I was able to successfully create the history table and query it, and then this is actually what's in that table. So this is some dummy data, and that's how we can build and execute a playbook. So I hope this really shows you the power of Ansible. I know it's some pretty simple examples, but you can see that you could easily make playbooks to kind of manage different values and different settings and environments within your system, within your organization. You could run this against 1 server, 5 servers, 10, 50 servers. I am just running this on Ubuntu in a subsystem within Windows, but you could do it as a standalone system. You can run it on other Linux distros. You can actually run Ansible straight on the IBM I, and have it manage other IBMIs. The one thing that you can't do if you install it on the IBMI is have it manage the IBMI you have it installed on. So if you install Ansible on your IBMI, then it would just have to manage other IBMI partitions or systems and not the one it's installed on, which is one of the reasons I wanted to show Ubuntu, because I thought, well, that would be a good way for people to kind of play around with it, get comfortable. Subsystem Linux stuff in Windows is pretty easy and straightforward to install and use. And so, that's hopefully it will get you started and give you some runway to run and test. One other thing I wanted to show you was, so if you wanted to run the playbook against a specific system, you could run the same command with a -L, and then you can actually specify the name of the system. So if your host file has 20 different systems in it, you could just specify the system by doing this. You can also specify the playbook to run against the groups of servers. So if you remember when I first created the file, I had a test servers group of servers, but I only had one host under there. I could put multiples under there, and then I could reference that test servers group when I call these playbooks. So here, for instance, if I just say L OSS dev, which is the name I gave it in the host file, you can see it's going to run through those same steps. I'm going to get a lot more red text from running the CL commands because the user profile is already created and the home directory is already created, but it'll run through all the other steps that it can do successfully, and we'll get to the similar result at the end with some things being executed and some not. Okay, so you can see some it ignored, some it skipped because it didn't need to run. Like it skipped the git because the git was already installed. This one right here. Okay, so I want to show one last thing. So if we do test servers, okay, and I typed it wrong. Okay, I think what I forgot here is limit. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. So forgot to specify. So you have to actually put a flag to limit it to whatever group. So in this instance, I'm limited to the group, and if the group had multiple hosts, it would run against all of those, or it would just run against the one like I have. So I hope that helps you guys. If you have comments or questions, please drop them below the video. I'll be uploading this video along with the links, like I said. And if you like these videos and want to see more, please hit subscribe and or shoot me an email. Let me know how you like them or what other things you'd like me to cover. Thanks, and have a great day.